This video is sponsored by Surfshark. So the Wheel of Time came and went, passing as most fantasy adaptations these days do, as just another in the mass-produced post-Game of Thrones industrial complex. And like most of those shows, it is inoffensive, bland, and uninspired. This is different though. You see, because I actually care about this one. And this show is not bland, it's bad. It's not good. I do not like it. I'm a little tired of people letting it off so easy. Sure, its effects are uneven and it frequently looks like a CW show, but I don't really care about that. The heart of the show is broken. Its machine is falling apart, but how and why? It hits familiar beats and, let's admit, has some pretty great moments. And yes, I recently made a video criticizing exactly this kind of media bad discourse I am conducting right now, but I actually don't intend to trash the show. I care a lot about the books, and I am friends with many in the Wheel of Time fandom, many of whom are just happy they have an adaptation at all. I am not here to hate. Actually, it's the opposite. I think the Wheel of Time is awesome. I read the first couple of books and found them enchanting, fun, and full of imagination. The purpose of this video is to explain in intense detail why the show is substandard. It fails not just as an adaptation, but as a season of television. I want to judge the show as if the books never existed. I want to figure out why the writing in this show so often lacks purpose and drive. For the record, I do think the show is a very bad adaptation of the source material, but that's not criticism alone. All successful adaptations differ from their source material to some degree. I'm far more interested in analyzing the lazy writing that consumes the show. But before doing that, I have to explain the biggest single adaptational change that ruined the show, that proved an insurmountable issue from beginning to end. Part 1. The Whodunit. For those of you who don't know, The Wheel of Time is a 15-book epic fantasy series written by Robert Jordan and completed by Brandon Sanderson. Though I haven't completed the series, I've had it described to me that the first 3 books are adventure quest fantasy stories. They follow a similar Lord of the Rings narrative, and the following 11 books are political fantasy stories more like Dune. Season 1 of The Wheel of Time pretty much follows the events of Book 1, which I have read. It's similar to Lord of the Rings in a lot of ways. This is not bad because Lord of the Rings is awesome. Maybe if Amazon devoted more time to this show rather than their Lord of the Rings spin-off show, we would have gotten a better, but I'm getting off track. To put it simply, the show is about a group of young people plucked out of their boring lives and sent into danger because one of them is the Chosen One. Now think about your favorite Chosen One stories. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. It's pretty clear from the get-go who the Chosen One is, right? This is how it is in the Wheel of Time books. While not explicitly stated at the start of the book, it is assumed that our main point of view is, in fact, the Chosen One. So, spoiler alert, I guess, for the show, but not for the books. Rand is the Chosen One. We figured it out. We did it, everyone. Chapter 2, Book 1, we realized he's the dragon. It's game over, guys. Maybe the showrunners thought this was too cliche, too typical of a fantasy narrative. Let's change it up and keep people on their toes, right? Let's make it a mystery. Anyone can be the Dragon Reborn. The result, however, is a show that feels like it's ashamed of its source material. It becomes a type of whodunit, focused more on misdirection than telling the main story. Hell, it's even prominent in their advertising. In the books, only a male can be the Dragon Reborn because it has to do with the thorough, complex, and brilliantly designed magic system. Not here though. Anyone can be the dragon. While some think they made this choice as some kind of political gesture, even the girls can be cursed with evil power and go insane. I think that is ridiculous because I don't think there's anything flawed about the way Jordan set up that system. I think they did it because they were afraid the show would be boring. They needed misdirection. They were not confident in the source material alone. Now, it's not just between these 3 boys, it's between Nynaeve, Logain, hell, even Moraine can be the Dragon Reborn. Disregarding the break from the source material, in which it is insanely obvious that Rand is the Dragon Reborn, the issue of turning the story into a whodunit is that the show is more invested in keeping you hooked from moment to moment, guessing, looking for the next clue, rather than, caring about the characters on their own merits. All of these characters have mostly interesting qualities to them, however none of them are fleshed out because there's a chance we might ruin the mystery of the show. Instead of one character being the bland Chosen One, sorry Rand, now everyone is the bland Chosen One. Instead of spending more time on the drama of their circumstances, making it feel real, many scenes exist simply to tease the audience. Hey, maybe this one's the dragon. But before we continue, here's a quick message about our sponsor, Surfshark. What is Surfshark VPN? Good question, Moraine. It's actually a virtual private network that keeps your online identity safe by encrypting the information sent between you and the internet. Also, a VPN swaps the real location of your device with a new one. This way you can travel around the globe in your device. But you say, there are no phones in the 2 rivers or computers. I have no idea what this magic is. Then I respond to you, this bit is getting a bit unwieldy and maybe we should move on. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 65 countries. When making this video, I had to do extensive research by watching Spider-Man on Netflix, except it's not in the US. See where I'm going with this? Access and unblock content unavailable to your country. It's that simple. Furthermore, Surfshark's Clean Web feature blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, allowing you to surf the web safely. I'm still in college, but I live an hour away from campus. They don't let me access their digital library unless I'm physically there. I had a paper due in 2 hours the other day, and you know what I did? I just put in my school's zip code and accessed a bunch of articles on JSTOR about the Merchant of Canterbury or something. I didn't read any of the books. Use code THING to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it. The link is below in the description. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video, and we're back to it. Since I want to be as exhaustive as possible, I really need to start from the beginning and take us moment by moment as the show transforms from decent entertainment to slow motion car crash. All the while, these primary issues will recur again and again, and an assortment of subsidiary issues will rear their heads too. This isn't about one wrong choice, but many. Part 2, a promising start. Episode 1 begins with a bit of exposition, and honestly, for fantasy, that's not that bad.
We don't know where or to whom. If he was reborn as a girl or a boy.
We learn that Moraine and this guy are out to look for the next child who may break the world. Simple, effective intro, we love it. And then sort of bafflingly, we get a second teaser that has little to do with the books, but let's look at it on face value. This is a fine way to open your show. Despite the Air Force One level of visual effects, we witness visually what Moraine just described. There are others like Moraine looking for the dragon who wear red and are bad. Also, this guy is tripping balls.
There's no one else here.
What is that about? Well, we're not gonna know for a while because this episode is about cramming all our early narrative beats into one episode so that please don't change the channel. Please just keep watching. Please, 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 dear God. The issue, of course, is that people have more patience for establishing characters than they think. I can't help but think episode 1 would have been vastly improved if it had been split into 2 parts, or if the cliffhanger was right when the Trollocs attacked. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Moraine and her companion slash bodyguard slash totally platonic friend are on the hunt for the true dragon. Not a real dragon, but a chosen one. A Frodo, a Harry Potter, etc. Based on prophecy, they could be a number of young people from a specific region and of a certain age. Except when later, it could be anybody? Who knows? It's just vibes at this point. Let's establish our main heroes after a pretty great title sequence, and I know this isn't that noticeable, but I'm not sure why there's this awkward slow zoom in for a couple of these establishing shots. Here's 2 of our leads, Nynaeve and Egwene. And in what is an okay addition to the show, Nynaeve pushes Egwene into the river when inducting her into the women's circle. It shows that Nynaeve is kind of pushy, get it? She knows best, and Egwene is maybe a little uncertain about her future. After a heavy-handed metaphor about going with the flow or something, we meet our guy Rand, who has 0 personality, and his dad, who is maybe Liam Neeson.
Let's stay home. Your mother could drink.
Rand loves Egwene, which is a problem we shall soon see. Later we get to see Rand's pals, Mat and Perrin. One is boring, and the other is just bad at gambling. They talk about some spooky stuff happening in the next town. I wonder if that will be relevant later. All of this is pretty standard, however, paced like the first act of a short film. Episode 1 has some of the best moments of the show with some of the worst pacing. I understand the writers were limited to 8 episodes, but how does that excuse so much bloat and wasted time later in the show? We establish Perrin and Rand as caring people. They truly look after Mat and want to protect him. Egwene walks in like she's fucking Garth Brooks or something. And Rand doesn't look too pleased. What, you say? I thought he loved her. I'll get to that. Later, when Moraine and Lan arrive, we get the full picture. This dramatic intro cues the viewer into seeing this not as the heir to Game of Thrones, but to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. In many ways, this is great. The tone certainly fits the first book of The Wheel of Time, which is, in essence, a very loose retelling of Fellowship. The Wheel of Time is, by Jordan's own words, a more realistic account of what a Chosen One narrative would be. Though the show is attempting a tone similar to Lord of the Rings trilogy, there's a certain, how shall I call it, marvelization that infects the show, mostly with quippy, Whedon-esque dialogue used to alleviate tension. Rand and Egwene finally get their time alone together. The conflict here is that Egwene wants to join the women's circle and become a wisdom like Nynaeve, but to do so would mean she could never marry anyone. Seriously? They're just gonna fuck in the middle of this public space? Okay. Earlier we got a glimpse at the writer's attempts to humanize Perrin and Mat, because in the first book they are pretty boring kids who happen upon a crazy adventure. They change in the process, sure, but at the start they're pretty much unmolded clay. Of course we have to change that, don't we? How could we relate to characters who don't have some kind of tragic backstory? But really the bigger issue is Part 3, Aging up the characters was a bad idea! Not to wax poetic on the beautiful simplicity of the Eye of the World too much, but it really is a marvel how Jordan builds this magnificent world and shows it through the eyes of his massively naive teenage protagonists. They have so much more to overcome and are learning about everything pretty much as the reader does. This makes exposition more seamless and gives room for our characters to develop as people. Contrast that to, well, Perrin has a wife. Hold on, let me say that again. Perrin has a wife. This may honestly be the most controversial choice of the show just based on how unpopular it was. On its surface, hardly a problem, but when, during the Trolloc raid still in the first episode, Perrin accidentally kills his wife, we get bigger problems. Not only is this a really outdated trope called fridging, it causes so much more problems than it solves. So this all leads me to the question, why? Why age up the kids at all? Were they afraid they wouldn't catch the adult fantasy viewers from Game of Thrones? That's what I suspect, because this feels like a studio mandate. It's not like Game of Thrones had children characters who grow up over the seasons. Why can't the Wheel of Time age up its characters over time? Especially since they're so insistent on focusing on Moiraine as a main character in the first season. This would solve a lot of the characters' general blandness from the start and would allow them to get molded by the strange events they encounter. Much like Lord of the Rings, the Tevarin are naive, kind people who must face a cruel world. Would you call Samwise or Frodo bland? No, not after witnessing their courage and strength. Would we relate to Sam more if he had a tragic incident in his past where he, I don't know, killed a kid with his car? Vehicular manslaughter wouldn't make Sam a better character. I don't know why the writers think giving Perrin and Mat tragic backstories would make them more interesting. As we shall see, it is quite the opposite, especially in Perrin's case. You see, in the books, Perrin is a big fellow. He is very nervous about accidentally hurting someone. He is a gentle giant, essentially. He's a sweet guy. But no, we need a reason. And oh boy, do they give us a reason. He's not just a naturally peace-loving guy, it's that he is traumatized from murdering his wife accidentally. When I first saw this, I, like many others, was very intrigued. Wow, what will they do with this? This is wild and dark and sad. This must go somewhere, and boy, were we misled. It turns out if you put the most intense trauma on a character right from the start, they really have nowhere to go for a long time. If they grow past this trauma too soon, they seem callous. If they realistically are burdened by this trauma forever and are depressed for most of the show, that is just not dynamic. It's like the writers needed to fix a pipe with a hammer, so they drove a bulldozer through the building. This would be fine if the writers were sincerely interested in dealing with this new Perrin, a Perrin unrecognizable from the book series. But no, turns out they just hoped this would add a little spice to his character, a little edge, and it turns out ruining him was the best method. Similarly, the writers take this method with Mat by giving him a comically over-the-top evil family.
You're going to be just like your dad. Don't prick like him.
His mom is cruel and his dad is a philanderer. Mat is good though because he takes care of his sisters. A bit cliche, but fine. This makes way more sense than Perrin's alteration. We establish Mat as a human, decent guy who just so happens to have issues with stealing and gambling. Okay. Again, so much of this would have been solved if the characters were young teenagers. Anyways, let's get back to our other leads. Rand and Egwene, and oh, are we already at another part? Part 4, Rand and Egwene bad. Following their little argument in the inn, Rand and Egwene have a chat atop this beautiful mountain. Rand talks about how he imagines raising a family in the two rivers, and even before Egwene can say, hey, I choose being a wisdom over continuing this relationship, Rand says,
I'm going to...
I know. I already know.
Because he understands that this is what Egwene truly wants. He loves her and knows that he needs to let her go and be who she is. It's difficult, but Rand handles it with a great deal of maturity. As you shall see, we retrace this conflict over and over and over again between these two characters. It is so prevalent that at the climax of the whole season, Rand's big moment of victory is when he realizes that Egwene would never want to raise kids with him because she is independent and wants to be an Aes Sedai. This is a non-victory. This means nothing from the very beginning. Rand is understanding. The conflict retraces itself when Egwene pursues Rand later on. She doesn't really change from her main choice, she simply struggles with the effects of her choice. Now here's a question for the writers. Why? Why would they resolve this emotional conflict so quickly only to retrace these story steps? Why couldn't there have been more uncertainty in Egwene's character? In the book, Egwene's conflict is far more complex than choosing between her boyfriend and her career. She never is with Rand. There is only a presumed love, started in childhood, that their families fostered between them. Egwene is torn between pursuing Rand, pursuing a life as a wisdom with Nynaeve, and pursuing a life as an Aes Sedai with Moiraine. She is torn by these complex life choices. There's a slow burn, will they won't they, throughout the books, which adds suspense. You see, there's a sense of progress in the relationship. It's building towards heartbreak or resolution. In the show, it starts in heartbreak, then just retraces the effects of the heartbreak. I think this is a major reason why people find their bickering annoying in episode 2. While this may be realistic, yes, it makes Egwene seem unreliable and Rand seem immature. While yes, she appears to want to be with him again, and he, I think rightfully, is upset that she walked back what she wants, he does overreact and is kind of a dick. And therein lies the issue. Stories must progress, they must move forward. It feels like there's no fundamental issue between them. They are both good people who clearly belong together. Remember The Office? Good show, right? When Pam and Jim got together, that was great. Now remember the messy, realistic stuff later on when they had fights and made up, then had fights and made up? It was boring because they weren't progressing together. Retracing an issue over and over is not character development. But let's get back to episode 1 for a bit. We've already encountered issues with Perrin and Matt's slapdash characterization, but now Nynaeve needs it. She hates Moiraine and distrusts the Aes Sedai. In the books, it's because everyone hates them. Literally, they are like terrifying villains. But since the town doesn't seem too hostile towards Moiraine, we need a good reason as to why Nynaeve hates her.
They call you a leader in this town, Wisdom, and here you are cleaning. This pool is sacred. It's an honor to clean it.
It's not because Moiraine is insanely condescending to her, no. It's because the Wisdom who raised Nynaeve was rejected by Moraine's school. Or in other words, she was denied entrance to the White Tower.
And when she got there, your sisters took one look at her ragged clothes, her peasant accent, and they turned her away.
I think this bit of backstory isn't terrible, but it weakens her character from the book. In the book, Nynaeve is young for her title and must stand up to scrutiny. Moiraine looks down on her. The whole world dislikes Aes Sedai, yet Nynaeve is the only of the bunch to stand up to her. This is why I love her. In the show, we're given the impression that Nynaeve holds a personal, somewhat unfounded grudge against Moiraine. It is implied that since the woman who raised her sought entrance to the tower, Nynaeve will come around to the idea and become an Aes Sedai herself. They frame this like Nynaeve standing up to the elite. The only resolution then will be Nynaeve setting aside her personal resentment and accepting her fate as an Aes Sedai. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Let's skip ahead a bit to the moment we've been waiting for. The inciting incident.
Tom, what's wrong?
I got dandruff on my balls.
Basically a bunch of Trollocs attack, and to give the show credit, a lot of care was put into the practical effects, as you can see in this behind-the-scenes footage. Let's see if this care holds true to the end of the season.
No.
Okay, we'll get to that later. From here, episode 1 should have ended, but instead we get everything jammed in. Perrin killing his wife, Nynaeve being taken by Trollocs, an interesting if inessential change from the books, and Rand's dad fighting for survival. In a scene that occurs off-screen in the books, we get the bulk of our action. This is the best action sequence of the show, sadly, and the coolest application of magic. See how beautifully they choreograph this sequence? It demonstrates the symbiotic relationship between Lan and Moiraine, and shows creative applications of the magic. Moiraine destroys a building just to throw bricks at these things. Obviously, this is a great improvement from the books, which told the entire raid as word of mouth since we were in Rand's POV the whole time. So Perrin kills his wife, like I said, and Nynaeve gets taken by the Trollocs, the first of our official fake-out deaths, and honestly, the least offensive. From minute 45 to 51 is our denouement, wherein our group is gathered and departs on their journey. 6 minutes and 10 seconds for all of the characters to get in the loop, witness the damage to the town, learn from Moiraine that they specifically must join her because they are important and they will leave their town in danger if they stay, Rand's dad getting healed by Moiraine, and them all departing with the seeming understanding and approval of a stunned town. Whew! It's a lot, and the weakest part of this episode. Again, they should have ended episode 1 at the start of the Trolloc raid, but I digress. This ending lends only to the sense that they had no time to properly set up their epic fantasy series. If I were to give this episode a rating, I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10. They got a lot accomplished in a mere 51 minutes. Part 5, episodes 2 and 3. Episode 2 begins with a really flashy but admittedly cool drone shot and introduces us to the other bad guys, the White Cloaks. How do we know they're bad? Because they are cartoonishly villainous.
Its bones and beak and feet cut the inside of your mouth.
I think it's fine to have such comical mustache-twirling villains as long as the show is somewhat self-aware. To me, this performance felt silly. What we need to know is that the White Cloaks hate the Aes Sedai and systematically murder them. Now our merry gang is fleeing Trollocs and face trouble at Terran Ferry when Moraine is like, these Trollocs can't swim, so let's destroy the ferry. And the guy who owns the ferry is like, but oh my son!
What about my son?
He foolishly hops into this raging whirlpool and Moraine, a little more concerned with, saving the world, allows him to die, and somehow she is despised by the other characters. Rand takes on Nynaeve's role in the book, who is, at this moment, presumed dead. He complains about Moraine and suggests they have little reason to trust her. I mean, he's right. That night, Moraine teaches a curious Egwene what it means to be an Aes Sedai and demonstrates that she has a small spark of power herself. This is a terrific scene, 10 out of 10, no notes. A great demonstration of the magic. It also makes sense for Egwene's character, who, having just lost to Nynaeve and her role in the women's circle, is reaching out to join something greater than herself. Now let's get to the bullshit, and thankfully this episode only has this small amount. Egwene snuggles up to Rand after informally breaking up. Rand very understandably says he wants to be alone because, you know what? He doesn't deserve to have his heart toyed with. Anyways, Rand vomits up a bat, but don't worry, they're all having crazy visions and all are getting uneasy with the journey. Tensions are high. Rand gets super aggressive and accuses Moraine, and he starts acting like a big old baby.
Horse is arrested.
No! Where are we going? Why should we trust you?
He accuses Egwene of being on her side. Egwene is a major Moraine stan, which who isn't, and calls Rand a stubborn bastard.
Moraine has done nothing but protect us. Tried to keep us safe.
Then here comes the zinger.
If I were her, I'd leave you behind too.
You already did.
Oh, so what is the problem here? Rand and Egwene are post-breakup at this point, and they still want to be with each other. They are retreading an old status, either more breakup or more love. We're retracing their conflict, something that was presumably resolved in episode 1. Neither are totally right in their actions, however, Rand comes off worse because he's acting like a man-child. Egwene just wants to have her cake and eat it too. Again, I feel like this conflict would be improved if Rand and Egwene were still at that will they won't they phase in their relationship. The audience would be rooting for a status they have never seen between them. Instead, the audience is looking forward to more of the same. If they get back together, we're at stage 1, and if they stay bitter and broken, we're getting more of the same. At least their bickering was short, because we're once again fleeing Trollocs, and oh wait, the other bad guys are here, and they are bad!
All those who seek passage through our land must be properly questioned.
This is a great setup and payoff, actually. Earlier, Moraine explained to Egwene how Aes Sedai can't tell lies. They get around that by bending the truth through clever phrasing and omission. Moraine does just that when being questioned by White Cloaks.
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. It was a monster, sir. 8 feet tall with a mouth like a boar. A group of them overtook the village we were in.
Later, Moraine tells the Taverin a long-ass story about the people from their village.
Their king, Aemon, like in the song, had sent messages to the neighbors they'd fought for in the past, and they were promised aid if they could hold for 3 days.
This, to me, goes on too long, but hints at the type of pace that could have been, pace closer to The Lord of the Rings, a pace that could have given an epic weight to the show. Because the show has such a breakneck pace, it feels out of place, and apparently the showrunner fought to keep this scene in. Honestly, great. It also provides a bit of foreshadowing to the last episode. Moraine's wound appears to be causing her significant health problems, and Land can't get her to slow down. Now we get a phrase preceding every classic argument.
Do you want to talk about it?
Rand says that they can't go back to the way things are. She made her decision. Lacking any real retort to this, Egwene says that she will never be Nynaeve's apprentice because she is dead.
I'm not going to be Nynaeve's apprentice because she's dead.
She tells Rand,
and I just want you to look at me and not hate me.
Which, fair. Rand says,
I can never hate you.
And see what I mean? This back and forth is tiresome. Egwene is being unrealistic and not allowing Rand time to heal, and Rand is just acting like a dick. While Egwene is right, Nynaeve is dead, it doesn't change the fact that she made a choice. She chose to leave Rand. It's kind of like a person choosing to break up with someone because they got a great job in another city. Then suddenly that job doesn't work out and they expect things to go back to normal. But how can that work when you've shown your priorities? And even in this situation with Nynaeve supposedly dead, Rand sees that Egwene still wants to join the Aes Sedai, where, again, they couldn't be together. He understands that what Egwene wants inherently excludes their relationship. Egwene has other priorities, which is fine as long as she allows Rand to go his own way. Of Of course they still love each other and show that in this scene, which makes this all the more annoying. It's like listening to your on and off again friends bicker every time you go out to eat. Anyways, Perrin sees a wolf. It hints that he is special, you know, and maybe the dragon? The editing of this scene, by the way, is so funny. How can you make this cute little guy look menacing? Moraine is totally out of it, and in an act of desperation, Lan takes the group into a spooky, abandoned city he knows the Trollocs won't enter. Why won't they enter? We'll deal with that later. It's a short-term solution that quickly sours. Mat and Perrin have a really sweet scene together showing how kind Mat is, but even nice guys like to steal evil knives from spooky cities every now and then. Look, Mat may be a kleptomaniac, but at least he has taste. He awakens some kind of evil force, and suddenly this safe harbor is a scary harbor. The group falls apart and splits up. But not before we get a Nynaeve jump scare. Whoa, whoa, whoa!
If you don't take me to them right now, I'll slit your throat.
Okay, great end of episode 2, and I'm gonna say it, the strongest episode. 7 out of 10. It feels like the most even all around, and surprise, surprise, sticks closest to the books. Episode 3 is when things start to get, well, let's just say there may be a reason why our advanced screening only showed the first 2 episodes, because Episode 3 is not very good. Our teaser shows how Nynaeve escaped her captors and killed a Trolloc. There's no stakes because we know she prevails, but still, awesome. We love it. At this point, our fellowship is broken. When situations should get more tough, they somehow get easier. Rand is with Mat, Egwene with Perrin, and Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve are all together. The clear highlight of the episode is Lan and Nynaeve. We see their budding romance. It's a real enemies to lovers arc that, contrasted with everything else, is dynamic and shows progress in the story. While their banter is not always the best.
You said you tracked me all the way from the Two Rivers to Shtalagoth. How?
Said you could ask, not that I'd answer.
Their relationship is far more interesting than Rand and Egwene, who are simply treading over old ground. Moraine's wound is a great dilemma, and Nynaeve is forced to help someone she hates. Another great demonstration of the magic system is when Nynaeve applies pressure to Moraine's wound and tells Lan,
I've heard about the bond between an Aes Sedai and a warder. That you feel what she feels. So get ready, because this is going to hurt.
It shows that Moraine and Lan's bond is both physical and mental. Our second best plot point of this episode is Rand and Mat, who wander through a gorgeous landscape. Honestly, geographically, what kind of world is this? And how far off did they wander? Because this looks nothing like where Moraine is. Rand and Mat debate whether they should pursue the White Tower or go home, which is a non-choice. They can't go home because they will endanger their hometown. Rand decides ultimately to head east to the tower because that's where he hopes he can rendezvous with Egwene. Now, the absolute worst duo in this whole episode is Perrin and Egwene, who really have nothing interesting between them. They too decide to head to the tower in the hopes they will find the others. They start a fire and Perrin asks,
Was that me or you?
We get it, they all might be the dragon, ooh. Perrin has an okay dream sequence in which he relives his wife's death. Then we have a jump scare with the main bad guy, and oh boy does he look terrible. His design, along with the quality of the CG, makes the Dark One look like a Sorcerer's Stone level threat. Then we're being chased by wolves in a sequence I can only call spatially baffling. The editing and direction make it look like a mess with there being no sense of danger. I just really hate this scene. There's no suspense because we never know how far away the wolves are or in what direction they're heading. Clearly the wolves should catch up with them, but this makes it seem like they outran the wolves? I don't know. Meanwhile, Mat and Rand find a town for a while, and this is when everything slows to a halt. Now I have to explain the infamous in-hopping of Book 1. Many readers complain that Mat and Rand's scenes in The Eye of the World are boring and repetitive. Basically, they have to fend for themselves as they travel inn to inn, often sleeping in the dirt, and occasionally playing music to earn a bed. Is it repetitive? Sure, but I personally love these scenes because they demonstrate just how helpless they are. There's constant danger because we're always aware of how clueless the kids are. Much of this is understandably cut out in the show. However, we get this one in sequence which is sort of a best of hits, but somehow it is neither best of or a hit. Let's talk about my favorite character, Tom Marilyn, and how they did him dirty, and maybe this can be treated as a microcosm of what the show misses tonally. In the book, Tom is an old gleeman, a storyteller and musician. He is introduced in the Two Rivers and actually starts out with the Ta'veren and Moraine. He is part of the Fellowship. While he does duck out halfway through the book, he is essential to Rand and Mat's survival. I actually understand why the show chose to cut him out of the start. Too many elements to introduce. They instead use him to cheat purposes and, in the process, destroy his charm. You see, Tom is a goofy character. character. World-weary but lighthearted. Over time, we learn that he's seen much more of the world than he initially lets on. On the surface, he's an aged jester figure, but underneath he's an Aragorn-level badass, throwing knives and whatnot. This is how I like to view the books, unassuming traditional fantasy cloaking a vast wealth of darkness and intrigue and inventiveness. The show turned him into this.
The colors of his morning, the darkness of his night.
They give him a guitar and make him sing like Nickelback with sex appeal. Avoiding the book's lightness, the show goes directly for the essence, ignoring what makes him a unique character in the first place. He enters and exits the show in the span of 2 episodes, and we couldn't care less about this grizzled, generic guy. In trying to make him stand out, they make him generic, and this, to be honest, is when the show fully lost me. Not only is Tom boring, he is utterly useless. The guys are getting along fine without him. In the book, he teaches them to be amateur gleemen so they can make a living and survive. And don't even get me started about his exit, because I will get to that. Anyways, we meet Tom and his boring song, and for some reason he steals from Matt. Come on. Why? I guess his purpose is to relate to Matt because he's also edgy and moody and likes to steal. Matt starts acting like a dick all of a sudden for reasons that will later be revealed.
And you're the reason we're in this shit town to begin with.
And Rand says,
Go on then. I'll handle this. You do whatever you want, like always.
Which is, like, objectively false? Matt has constantly stood up for his friends and been a voice of reason in the group, but whatever. Now Matt is chatting with the innkeeper, and can I just say, this dialogue kills me.
I've got an idea. Why don't you tell me what you can do? I'll see if I can find you something.
Back home, I was pretty well off, horse trader.
Thank goodness you're here.
Everybody! Everybody, I have a horse trader with no horses here. Does anyone need a horse trader with no horses?
I feel like the writers waver between an epic Lord of the Rings feel and a quippy Marvel movie. What is the purpose of this long conversation? Matt talks about needing only 1 ticket home, however he says he has people to take care of, which, yeah, his sisters.
You don't know the quickest way to get back. We're only gonna need 1 ticket.
This shows that Matt is moving in a more evil direction, sure, but it's just talk and doesn't reflect his actions. Now we're back to the worst duo, and they are still running from wolves, but wait, they meet some Brooklyn hipsters, tinkers! I think the writers were trying to accomplish 2 things in this sequence, and for some reason this sequence needs to drag on for multiple episodes. Here's what it accomplishes. Perrin learns the way of the leaf, which is pacifism. Naturally, he likes this because violence hasn't been so useful to him in the past, and Egwene flirts with this guy, which shows only that she is still in love with Rand. Problem is, we know this stuff already. We know Perrin is traumatized and doesn't want to use violence, understandably, and we also know Egwene is still in love with Rand. This isn't the most exciting sequence from the books either, but if that is the case, why not shorten this sequence and lengthen the much more dynamic and exciting captured by the White Cloaks, a sequence that is hopelessly rushed in episode 5. Not to mention the Tinkers are bland and talk in more Whedon-esque quips.
Our fires are open to all, for as long as you need them.
And you two, you look like you need them.
I don't want to focus too much energy on the Tinkers because while I hate them deeply, this sequence demonstrates how the writers have nothing to do with Perrin or Egwene. Perrin is static, emotionally dead, and has nowhere to grow. He learns a philosophy, the way of the leaf, that he can apply to his life, and Egwene simply turns down a potential romance. Back to Matt. He's caught by Tom trying to steal money from a corpse. They have a moment of bonding because they both like to steal, I guess. Not sure why this show is going with this angle, especially since this moment seems mostly a convenient time to relay info about the Aiel, a race of people that have no real meaning to us at the moment and don't really play an important factor until later on.
He's an Aiel.
But it is rare to see that color of hair outside the Aiel waist.
Later, Rand is flirting with the innkeeper.
Ugh, I'm not prying. Maybe I can help.
Ooh, will he fall for someone besides Egwene? Will he? Oh no, she's actually evil.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Waiting.
At this point in the show, we've seen several characters display traits that may reveal they are the Dragon Reborn. Perrin has his wolves, Egwene has her fire, and Rand can knock down a heavy door. But it's not just any heavy door, it's ironwood.
That door is made of ironwood. 3 men your size couldn't break it down.
This is another example of the bad whodunit plot. In the book, this scene involves Rand channeling a bolt of lightning to explode half of the inn. Pretty cool, but because we don't want Rand to appear more suspicious of being the dragon, we get the epic moment of him pushing the door down. Here follows one of the goofiest chase scenes I've ever seen. Rand and Mat are pretty tall, wouldn't you say? And they're running fast. They are pursued by a dark friend who is much shorter, is holding an awkward sword, and is grinning like Jack Torrance from The Shining. It seems pretty logical that Rand and Mat would just outrun her. Already they have a pretty big lead, so they could probably just duck behind a building. But alas, she corners them in this vacant alley. I love the blocking here where Rand and Mat are clearly trying to look like they have nowhere to run, but they could just like go back the other way. You know, maybe they got tired. Maybe their feet hurt. Maybe dark friends have way better stamina. At least we get some heavy-handed exposition preceding a villain's death.
Who are you?
He wants you to save us. Have you seen that? The wheel keeps turning and people keep bursting. Every man who comes to this shite town has a story. Flood, drought, war, sisters murdering their brothers, children killing their parents.
Afterwards, we get one of my favorite lines in the show.
We're gonna leave now.
Because yeah, they could just run in the opposite direction. Tom throws a knife through her throat and is like, yeah, maybe you kids need my help, and off they go on their merry journey. This scene is all just so goofy to me because of the mixed tone. This character who was once so casual and who spoke like it was 2022 is now relating classic fantasy exposition. The episode ends as Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve encounter Liandrin, another Aes Sedai. And what? They did what? They captured the Dragon Reborn?
We captured a man calling himself the Dragon Reborn.
Okay, mystery solved. Show's over. We got him. We got him, folks. Oh no, there are still 4 more episodes? Part 6, The Long Crawl, episodes 4 and 5. It's at this point that we're nearing the show's middle. I'm not the first to say that second acts are difficult to write. Since this season is 8 episodes, episode 4 is the do or die moment in the season, the bridge to the second half of the show. Many, I've noticed, defend episode 4 mainly because of its shock ending. I wouldn't merely call that a cheap cliffhanger though, as it really doesn't change much about our fundamental story. Moraine needs to find the Ta'veren and get them to safety. Simple as that. This is about urgency and survival. Even during the slow midsection of book 1, Robert Jordan keeps the urgency moving, emphasizing the intense danger each character faces. There's no time to relax. So how do we spend most of episode 4? That's right, we're in the boring episode. At least it starts with an interesting bit of action in Gildan, exploring who Loghain is and why he was captured. While everyone is looking for the Dragon Reborn, there are these guys called False Dragons, who are powerful channelers, but they don't have that spark, you know? Mainly they stir up trouble. In the book, everyone knows Loghain is a false dragon, but here we can imagine that some character we care nothing about is maybe the important one, actually. In another type of show, I could believe it, but not The Wheel of Time, which is just too old school for that. I can't help but imagine audiences getting bored with this almost completely silent random guy who has hijacked our narrative thrust. Again, we're on a straightforward path. The group has split up and they must find each other in Tar Valon, but with the possibility that this is the Dragon Reborn, how important is Moraine's quest? She doesn't seem too confident anymore. This, at worst, upends our narrative thrust and at best feels like filler. We know deep down that this is a false alarm. One of our main characters has to be the big hero, but we have to patiently wait as our characters try to find purpose again. I hate this episode passionately. If episode 3 was a 4 out of 10, episode 4 is a 3 out of 10. None of this is fun. Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve are recuperating in a camp with the other Aes Sedai. They share responsibilities suppressing Loghain's powers, which is so difficult we spend half the episode sitting down and looking constipated. More characters fill the runtime, characters we couldn't care less about, though the show continues insisting we care a lot about. Our main story is lost in a mess of subplots and blunt character development. I don't want to spend too much time on this episode because it does so little for the show narratively, but I must discuss it thoroughly because this was the episode when I started truly hating the show. So we have these different types of Aes Sedai called Ajahs. I'm only going to explain this as deeply as the show presents it. Moraine is blue, Karenni is green, and Liandrin is red because she is evil and hates men. This isn't too far from the book, by the way, yet I can't help but feel this information and world building is unnecessary at this point in the story. Moraine decides to share the burden of watching Loghain, not like she has other stuff to do, but whatever. Meantime, Lan seems to be chilling too. He's shooting the shit with his buddy, guy we're supposed to care about for 2 episodes. Just like Tom! And just like Tom, he is bland as fuck.
Cheap trick.
His name is Stepan, and he is Karenni's warder, just as Lan is Moraine's warder. And what is this conversation doing between them?
Emmeline isn't here.
What does it add to the story? These are 2 characters who will be, spoiler alert, both dead by the end of the next episode. They gossip about Moraine and Lan, then reveal to the audience that Liandrin is gaining traction with the others. The Reds want to gentle Loghain before an official trial. Gentling means they remove his access to channeling, making him really sad. So this is some fun politics we're engaged in. We're trying to figure out whether it's okay to gentle a man before or after a trial. Does any of this matter beyond showing us that the Reds are bad and not good? No. We already know the Reds are bad. They wear red. Duh. 13 minutes and 40 seconds into the episode, we finally get to see where our leads are, and oh, they're just doing the same stuff as before. Egwene and Perrin continue their awful adventure with the Tinkers and continue getting lectured about pacifism.
We forswear violence and all instruments of it.
I suppose this is all supposed to reinforce Perrin's aversion to violence, which, again, I argue doesn't need reinforcing. Now's as good a time as any to discuss scene progress and character choices. Let's look at these few scenes we get with the Tinkers. Our first scene merely recaps what has already happened. They are uncertain but make no change in their situation. They are completely passive in this scene. However, there is a hint that may change soon.
You were wandering the Carlane Plain in rags, without food or gold. You're bandits, you're not very good ones.
Their second scene merely reinforces the way of the leaf and is a scene of exposition. Neither character makes a choice or experiences anything that may alter their situation. The third scene shows Perrin and Egwene enjoying their time with the Tinkers. Their situation is the same, but they're less miserable about it now. We get more exposition about the Tinkers, and Egwene and this guy flirt with each other. Following this, even more information about the Tinkers is relayed to Perrin. Finally, Egwene is asked by this guy,
"Who is he? The man that holds your heart."
This scene could have shown us something. Egwene could have been feeling affection for this man. She could have made a choice that revealed character. Instead, we get the decision made for us. She is in the same limbo, loving Rand, revealing nothing except that she and Rand belong to each other. So that's Perrin and Egwene this entire episode. That's their story. Does anything change for them? At this point, their characters are tools through which the writers can exposit about the Tinkers. They make no choices that reveal character, they make no progress on their journey, and encounter no obstacles on their path. I wanted to focus on these collections of scenes because they describe so much that doesn't work in these episodes. For a character to feel real and interesting, we can't just be told about their problems, we have to see them make choices. A choice is not merely deciding to stay with the Tinkers because that was the status quo. A choice reveals an aspect of their character. For example, when Nynaeve chooses to help save Moraine, that shows that despite her stubbornness, she chooses to place others before her own interests, always. We learn something about her. Or when Egwene chooses to be a wisdom over pursuing a relationship with Rand, that tells us that she is ambitious and wants an unconventional lifestyle. When again and again, Egwene wavers between wanting Rand and not wanting him, we aren't really learning anything new about her because those aren't choices that change her circumstance. She's already made the choice that reveals this aspect of her character. We are so far just reliving the consequences of that choice, when we should be learning about a new choice, something that could reveal another aspect or layer to her character. This failure to give choices to our leads presents a real problem in the show. Now you may be saying this must be how the book is. They are constrained by the book. On the contrary, Egwene and Perrin are some of my favorite characters in the book. They must constantly make difficult decisions. For example, before finding the Tinkers, there's a scene where they're being hunted by evil skin-shredding crows, and Perrin must decide whether he will let Egwene die by crow or if he'll give her a less painful death with his own axe. It is brutal. Yeah, and he wonders if he'd even be capable of killing Egwene, but he decides he'd do it if only to save her from the horrors of the crows. Now, that reveals character. That makes Perrin seem far more complex, doesn't it? It's because in the book, our characters are always making choices. Here, they seem to be coasting forward, save for a select few. Back to episode 4. Matt, Rand, and now Tom are doing what they were up to in episode 3, just trying to survive. They take shelter at this house in the woods, and we get some more lovely exposition. Tom explains all about his cool backstory and his nephew who could channel, and oh, he's gone now. Okay, he's gone. Also, Matt is acting pretty strange and evil. Almost like maybe he's the dragon. To cap off our terrible time with Tom, we see Matt wielding that evil, scary dagger he stole from Shadar Logoth. Almost like it has something to do with his mood or something? I don't know. And Tom intervenes. It seems like Matt maybe killed that little girl, but there's also a fade there, so guess we'll never know. Now I'd like to detail another half-assed reimagining of a great scene from The Eye of the World. I promise I'll stop doing this, just Please let me have this one. In the book, they do think Tom died after attacking a Fade. For whatever reason, maybe it's the rushed editing, this scene makes it look like Tom is about to tackle the Fade on his own, and Matt and Rand are just like, peace, and duck out, abandoning Tom without another worry in their mind. And why should they? They just met the guy. We're left wondering what the hell happened, pretty certain Tom is fine, and confused about Rand and Matt's behavior. But don't worry, that's the last we see of these characters for months. In the book, Tom has been with Rand and Matt since day one. He's taught them how to be gleemen. He's their guide through the world. Because of Tom's history with his own nephew, he sacrifices himself, ensuring the boys escape to safety in order to fight the Fade. It is very emotional and not taken lightly. This is a big step in Rand and Matt's growing up and learning to fend for themselves. This scene cemented Tom as one of my favorite characters. Here in the show, he's just some guy Rand and Matt used to escape some trouble. It is tragic. The bulk of the episode, of course, concerns the camp with Loghain. The entire focus of the show is suddenly on this random guy who may or may not be the dragon. In the meantime, Lan and Nynaeve continue their flirtations, and we learn about the warders and their pansexual lifestyle. None of this is terrible, but it does feel unnecessary when we're losing sight of our main narrative. Moraine, after being out for the last episode, is more concerned with this new guy than in retrieving the lost Ta'veren.
20 years we hunted, and we lost them.
I lost them.
When she tells Lan,
I don't think the Dark One has any more idea who the dragon is than we do.
This is when we hit rock bottom. All urgency has dissipated. Moraine, our supposed show lead, has lost sight of her mission. Maybe instead of somberly saying we lost them, she could, I don't know, try desperately to find them? As if any of this was important at all? But no, we're building to a cool scene. Don't worry, there's gonna be a cool scene later. Don't worry about it. Another example of a scene that reveals nothing new about a character is when Liandrin tries warming up to Nynaeve. Liandrin is already so mustache-twirling evil, we know Nynaeve would not budge to her side. This scene only shows that Nynaeve is smart, Liandrin is evil, and we already knew all of that. Back in the cave, Moraine tries to gather info from Loghain. All of these scenes are funny because it looks like the Aes Sedai are pooping. But wait, we're in trouble now. It's an ambush, and Loghain is trying to break free. Loghain's army looks like 5 to 10 extras, but whatever. We get some Last Airbender movie levels of blocking, and then there's some slow-mo fighting in the forest reminiscent of something on the History Channel. Everyone fights, Karenni dies, and before we know it, everyone is in life-threatening condition. Lan is gonna die, but wait! Nynaeve goes insane and heals everyone in the great tradition of fake-out deaths. Finally, they gentle Loghain before his trial. He sort of forced their hand there. Nynaeve holds the final shot, and it feels pretty clear to us that she must be the Dragon Reborn. She is not. But why not? Let's pretend she's the dragon now. Anything to pad the runtime. There's honestly more I could say about episode 4, cringy dialogue, lazy exposition, lacking character motivation, but a lot of this I already discussed, and some of it I will explore in later episodes. But let's talk about the absolute worst episode of the season. Yes, even worse than the finale. This is the 2 out of 10. It's 2 out of 10. I can't avoid it. Episode 5, The Big Bad. From here, not everything improves, but at least it gets more interesting. This is when the show turns into a stagnant pool. You'd think an 8-episode season adapting a 600-page book would have enough material to worry about, right? The issue would be in compressing, not expanding. Enter the most egregious filler episode of the season. If last episode felt like a sidetrack, this one mostly concerns the warder of the Aes Sedai who died in the last episode. These characters are not in the book. Also, they do not advance the story in any way. Not that it's necessary, but they basically exist to advance information we already know about the bond between warders and Aes Sedai. It's cool we get to see the aftermath of one of those relationships, but by God, how is this more important than our main story? We start with an overlong funeral for Karenni with one of the most unintentionally funny pairings of soundtrack and visuals I've seen. This scene adds nothing and has little to do with our main characters, but we get some nice, shallow graves. What an exciting teaser. So a month has passed, and we're all basically still where we were last time. Everyone's casually moving to Tar Valon. Hey, maybe we could add some dirt to these cloaks to make them more realistic? No? Okay then. Matt looks like shit and is abusing children now, I guess.
What? You piece of shit.
I don't know, Matt, that's some pretty dragon behavior. Finally, we're at Tarvalon, the phallic city. Let's feast upon its wonders, and oh, it's just a clean set in a studio. Not to be too harsh on the production design, but you can feel the attention to detail faltering a little bit. This just doesn't feel like an expansive place. Matt and Rand don't go straight to the tower because they want to shower or something. Really, Rand is just afraid about what they'll do to Matt because he thinks he's the dragon. Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine show up to the tower, and Nynaeve is just like, you said my people would be here. Moraine says, don't worry, I've got eyes and ears all over this city. They'll find them. Okay, sure, not like Rand and Matt just walked through the main gate. I love this dynamic between Moraine and Nynaeve. Nynaeve cares so much about her friends and is like,
maybe I'll have a look around town myself.
Do not underestimate the women in this tower.
This is probably the best part of this episode. So for 2 episodes, Egwene and Perrin have just been chilling with the Tinkers, but finally, we get some conflict. The White Cloaks are here, and the Tinker's philosophy of pacifism is put to the test. Let's see how that goes for them.
Even if you crush it, bury it, burn it.
To be clear, the Tinkers do their best to protect Egwene and Perrin, and this sentimental moment being broken by the White Cloaks is very welcome. Nevertheless, they get captured and face questioning. What is this jump scare with the horse? Pretty sure they don't screech like that, but I don't know. I don't personally know any horses. These scenes of interrogation are the most exciting of the episode, yet they are intertwined with the most stagnant and boring of the whole show. Following their capture, Rand has an entirely expository conversation with a new character, Loyal. Nothing wrong with this, but it feels like it has no urgency, especially compared to the extreme danger Egwene and Perrin face. But the worst, the absolute worst crime of this episode is Steppen, a character we briefly met in the previous episode. We had a whole teaser dedicated to his sorrow after losing his Aes Sedai, the woman he was meant to protect. That should be enough, right? Actually, no, because for roughly 19 minutes of this 58-minute episode, we devote our time to his story. What do we learn from this story, and how does it advance the plot, characterization, or themes? From what I can tell, we get some world building about the Warders, but we already got a good deal of the same material in the last episode. What is it then? We're reminded over and over how important the bond between Warder and Aes Sedai is. This seems to be the purpose, to reinforce the bond between Lan and Nynaeve. The problem is, we know this already. This is constantly reinforced numerous times throughout the show. In fact, this is really the only thing we know about their relationship. So Steppen has a speech about how we met Karenni, and the Warders are like, yeah man, sucks she died. Then Steppen melts her ring in a ritual ceremony. Fine. But I remind you, we already performed one ritual devoted to Karenni in the 3-minute teaser, so this feels overdone. Back to Egwene and Perrin. Valda, our mustache-twirling villain, is trying to prove that Egwene is an Aes Sedai. She just needs to show her powers or he will kill Perrin. This is great tension because Egwene so desperately wants to have powers. It's at this time Perrin reveals to Egwene that he accidentally killed his wife, so he feels like he deserves to die. Egwene acts predictably and is like, no, it's not your fault. Eventually, Egwene manages a tiny puff of fire, which, honestly, I love this moment so much.
You'll find me harder to kill than that girl.
Ultimately, it is Perrin with his mysterious glowing eyes who breaks them out of there, and Egwene stabs Valda in the neck, and they make a nice little exit. Perrin doing this is a cool moment, but has little consequence. In the book, Perrin blacks out and murders a bunch of White Cloaks as they escape, reinforcing his fear of his own violence. I think it would have been cool if he went crazy and stabbed Valda himself, only to further emphasize his fear of himself. But whatever, this is cool too. While all of this is going on, Nynaeve has yet another dull conversation with Liandrin. This conversation has little tension because we already know how Nynaeve feels about joining the Evil Reds. I feel like the writers want us to think there's a chance she'll join them, but there is nothing in Nynaeve's character or the presentation of these scenes that suggest it is even a possibility. Immediately after this scene, Nynaeve shows up to find Rand and Matt.
I went there and found the woman you spoke of.
By the light.
Would have been cool if we got to see the efforts she took to find them, but instead Loyal just took it upon himself to find her, which feels lazy and honestly a missed opportunity to show how stubborn and persistent Nynaeve is. Rand and Nynaeve have a little chat about how strong and awesome Egwene is. Yeah, maybe you could take some kind of action to try to find her instead of just talking about her? No? Okay. After Perrin and Egwene escape, Moraine and Liandrin argue about which side Nynaeve will join, which continues to feel useless, since I can't believe there is any actual risk Nynaeve will join the Red Aja. This scene tells us, however, that Moraine and Liandrin may be used to fuck. Then Moraine and Alana chat about the Amerlin arriving, about how Moraine has no designs on the seat. Okay. Alright, it's politics. I can't help but feel like this is horribly timed, especially since we don't really understand who or what the Amaryllis seat is yet. My understanding is that the majority of the later Wheel of Time books are politics focused, like Dune, but the first 3 books, like I said earlier, are adventure quests. In order to fill in the first season, they are adding the White Tower politics. I understand their reasoning, but I don't think the execution is successful. In order for us to care about the Tower politics, we have to care about our characters and their goals. Right now, the most pressing issue is that our group needs to be reunited, and they are so close. Debating whether Nynaeve will choose one Aja over another means nothing to our main plot point of who is the dragon and how do we stop the Dark One? Especially when our most pressing issue is stalling, this tower stuff should be secondary. Finally, our least consequential episode ends with the least consequential sequence. Steppen and Lan go drinking. Steppen is deeply depressed, as we have seen and been told again and again. Lan passes out and wakes up in a panic. I have to say, just this blocking, what is this? Did Lan pass out while leaning on his elbow? Why is he just sitting like that? Lan gets up and finds that Steppen has killed himself. While the show manages to put some emotion into Steppen's funeral, this is the 3rd death ritual in the episode. It feels overlong and, again, inessential. This would be fine if the season had all this time to do whatever, but so many great moments are removed from the book in order to add this? This adds nothing except to tell us yet again that Lan and Moraine's connection is super deep and important. My theory is that the writers of the show had little confidence in the material they were adapting. Karenni and Steppen, being characters created entirely by the show writers, are theirs to play with. They don't have to worry about later books or the dragon mystery. They can have their own story. I think they throw their creative energies into these characters because that is simply more interesting to them. For a viewer though, I have to ask, what is the point? So how could this episode be improved? First, I think the capture and rescue of Egwene and Perrin by Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine could have occurred in the previous episode. That's how it happens in the book. Instead, the show loses any urgency. How about instead of another pointless conversation with Leandrin, Nynaeve acts on her instincts and goes out trying to find Egwene or Perrin? There was so much missed here in favor of inessential plot lines or scenes that repeat the same information again and again. But here's the good news. Things are getting better. Part 7. Getting better? Question mark? Well, briefly. Yes. Things get better. Episode 6 sees our characters finally reuniting. There are some great scenes, brilliant interpretations of the source material, and a building sense of momentum as we are finally getting back on track. Forgive me if I move a little fast through these episodes because there are far more interesting things to focus on in episode 8. While these 2 episodes are better, they don't do anything extraordinary. 6 is a solid 7 out of 10, and 7 is a 5 out of 10. The Amaryllis seat is the head of the White Tower. Her name is Siuan. She holds a trial with the Aes Sedai to figure out what the hell happened with Logain, why they gentled him, etc. Moraine, controversially, keeps information from the Amaryllis seat about her secret side mission with the Taverin. After this, Moraine and Lan finally find Rand and Mat. Rand is very hostile.
Don't be stupid.
I'm not going to let you hurt him!
Put that down.
And Moraine is rightfully pissed at their stupidity.
Stupid boy.
Turns out that the evil dagger Mat stole in episode 2 is actually poisoning him and turning him into an asshole. Moraine seemingly fixes this, but Rand is somehow still suspicious of her. All of the tension about Mat possibly being the dragon is immediately dissipated, though Moraine still tries teasing that he is stronger than he has any right to be.
I don't know. He's stronger than he has any right to be.
Egwene and Perrin are finally at the tower, and Egwene is eager to be Moraine's #1 student.
I took something from them. Valda won't hurt any more of your sisters.
This is good. Everyone is finally coming together. Now here comes the standout part of this episode. Moraine meets in secret with Siuan, the Amaryllis seat, and a bit of subtext is expanded in the show. In the book, Moraine and Siuan work together, evading the suspicions of the rest of the tower. But the show actually shows a romantic relationship between the two, and I think it adds so much to their characters and to the show in general. They really added something great to Jordan's story. Also, this line, echoing an earlier line in the episode, is just so hilarious.
On your knees. On your knees.
After having sex, Siuan tells Moraine about her dream, and this is really the spark that brings us to the finale.
The heart of every prophecy is the same. The dragon will either defeat the Dark One or join him.
And Moraine says,
You don't know which one of them is the dragon.
Take them all.
We'd be sentencing the other 4 to certain death.
Maybe, maybe not.
So a lot of maybes here. They're suggesting going to the Eye of the World, an actual plot point in the Eye of the World. The reason is flimsy, I think, since this was merely a dream shown to Sioan, but I nevertheless love the progress because finally, we're going somewhere. We have a goal and stakes. The dragon must go to the Eye of the World to stop the Dark One, but Moraine still doesn't know who the dragon is. And if all of the contestants go, everyone who isn't the dragon will likely die. I personally don't love the tension of everyone else possibly dying, as it just seems an excuse to cause friction within the group. But hey, it's something. It's conflict. Anyways, Nynaeve and Egwene reunite and meet the Amerlin Seat, a terrific scene displaying their contrasting personalities. Egwene is so eager to be accepted, but Nynaeve is clearly the stronger one, and the one Sioan is interested in.
I've been told you're the most powerful channeler we've seen in 1,000 years. Nynaeve Almira.
While this is a humorous scene, it tells us so much about their characters and hints at the potential conflict that may arise between the two friends. Also, this is such a great line.
Swan Sanche waits for only one woman. And it's not you.
According to their plan, Moraine gets banished from the White Tower for withholding information. This is something they expected and planned for, but it plays out with forced drama. This just felt like the wrong tone for the scene, which is really a triumphant start to her greater plan. So here we are, finally. The whole gang's back together again and ready, finally, to continue their mission. Okay, this is a nitpick, but why did they just chase the horses away? Like, don't those horses belong to someone? Everyone seems on board for the plan. Cross through this dangerous portal and quick travel to the Eye of the World so they can defeat the Dark One. Egwene justifiably asks,
And what about whoever's not the dragon? What happens to them?
And Moraine is like, I don't really know, which is funny when she knows they will all likely die. It's a great example of Moraine lying without exactly lying, so they're all ready to go on their merry way. Everything is moving forward. Then Matt just stands there and they all yell at him, and Matt just doesn't join them. Okay. Here's the thing. The actor who plays Matt was replaced for the second season. No one really knows why. There are speculations about why, but since nothing seems to be confirmed, I really don't want to spread possible misinformation. Regardless, his exit is a major blow, especially since he was one of the most entertaining characters, and even more especially since it appears like production had to rewrite the finale in order to fit in his absence. Because let's be real, Matt's decision to stay makes no fucking sense. There's no real resolution in the finale either. He simply is gone, and the characters have to half-heartedly deal with this issue. Sure, Matt said in earlier episodes about how he wanted to leave and didn't trust Moraine, but he was under the spell of the dagger, and now seemingly cured of that curse, he should be eager to stay true to his friends. We've seen time and again how loyal Matt is, so this all just feels like a mess meant to deal with an absent actor. Despite the fumbled ending, this episode had momentum. Things came together. Now we come to our penultimate episode, an episode that does some stuff right and so much wrong. First off, the teaser is great and has some of the best action choreography since episode 1. The teaser sets up an important reveal. In the ways, there's some brief bickering about leaving Matt behind, which paints Rand in a terrible light.
We are not leaving without him.
He made his choice.
Did he? Or did you make it for him?
Look, Rand, buddy, Matt chose to stay behind. Overall, The Ways is a pretty great set piece. It's got that spooky Mines of Moria feel. Also, Rand and Egwene seem to finally come to their senses. I just want those two little lovebirds to be happy, you know? That CG Trolloc doesn't look great, but the whole sequence serves its purpose. We get our characters to their new location, and we get increased hostility and suspicion after the spooky wind tells them all about their insecurities.
You will murder these children and call it heroism.
Egwene will never love you as much as you love her.
We're now in Fal Dara, another city that on the outside looks pretty cool, but inside is just another bland series of hallways. We also get a brief tease of Padden Fane, you know, that grinning dude following them around. He just pops through the gate. I really enjoy what the show is doing to Moraine at this point. She is clearly getting exasperated with the group and desperately wants to know who the Dragon Reborn is. Some of her actions are starting to seem genuinely questionable. She tells another Aes Sedai to send the Red Aja after Matt. Like, what the fuck, Moraine? What? Moraine, in her desperation, seeks out Min, someone who can kind of sort of see people's futures. I thought this whole scene was really well done. Nevertheless, Moraine still can't figure out who the dragon is. Now here's where things get rocky. Egwene tries convincing the others to go to the Eye of the World after Moraine's pep talk.
I don't want you to die. Any of you. But whichever of you goes to the Eye of the World and is not the dragon, you will die there, ground to dust between two forces of nature.
The others are understandably upset about likely dying, and Egwene doesn't convince anyone.
I'm not doing this because Moraine said we should. I want to go to the Eye of the World because if there's even a chance she's right, then it's worth it.
There is, however, a stupid love triangle. Rand and Egwene have a petty argument. Gee, aren't they good at that? About leaving Matt behind.
He probably went back to Tarvalon for that bloody stolen
You don't know anything about that!
He left us!
Again, Matt chose to stay. Then we get this excellent burn.
About that!
Left us!
Well, I guess you're the expert on that, aren't you?
Perrin tries defending Egwene, and Nynaeve says,
Just stop. I am so tired of you two fighting over her like she's something you can win.
This comes out of nowhere because as far as we've seen, there was never any hint that Perrin was interested in Egwene like that, or vice versa. Nynaeve saying this suddenly ignites Rand into accusing Perrin of liking Egwene, and Perrin is like, dude, my wife just died. Can you not be such a dick?
The only woman I've ever loved was my wife.
And the whole thing is stupid. I hate it. It sucks. It's the worst. I hate it. It sucks. If they wanted to show the group at their lowest, this is not the way. It is forced, and the love triangle lasts only one scene. It exists simply to break them all down. So everyone is sad, and Nynaeve decides to go stalk Lan. Lan just teleports to her. Jesus Christ, okay. I love the look Lan gives her, like, yeah, kids love me. He really is the whole package. This all precedes a steamy sex scene, which, how can any of us object to that? Now Egwene and Rand make up. Rand says,
I don't want to lose you.
And says she needs to go to the White Tower. This is all basically what Rand told her in episode 1, except replace becoming a wisdom with becoming an Aes Sedai. He now holds on to the hope that he can be in her life. Rand says he can be her warder one day. This scene is... it's something we all expected. Unlike Nynaeve and Lan's romance, we always expected Egwene and Rand to work it out. We know the whole time what they will choose. Now, are you ready for some jarring storytelling and what is arguably the worst moment in the show? You know how this whole season was designed to hide who the real dragon is, even though it's never a secret in the books? Well, here we are. Here is the reveal, and it just comes out of nowhere. All Rand needed was some post-nut clarity, and suddenly he realizes that he is, in fact, the Dragon Reborn.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
No matter how fast or how far you move, you cannot escape your fate. You are the Dragon Reborn. You are the Dragon Reborn.
We are shown this information with a hasty montage. Rand was actually channeling all these times. Rand suddenly remembers that stuff his dad said to him when he was wounded in episode 1 and pieces together that he was the baby born on the mountain and he fulfills the prophecy. This is quite confusing because we never saw that scene with Rand's dad. That was deliberately held from us in order to keep the whodunit alive. This all feels like it comes out of nowhere simply because we're at episode 8 and we have to reveal things somehow. The satisfaction of the search is totally destroyed. Though I am against the whodunit concept, I think it would have been cooler if we didn't know who the dragon was until the final episode with Rand showing his true power at the Eye of the World, destroying the army, and... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Suffice it to say, the reveal is lazy. In a cool misdirect, we see that Rand went to Moraine's door in the middle of the night so they could go off in secret to the Eye of the World, both wanting to protect the ones they love. Apparently all Rand had to say was, I'm the dragon, and Moraine believes him for some reason. It could have been possible that Rand was only saying this to protect his friends, but whatever. It doesn't matter now because we are finally at the end. Part 8. It all comes crashing down. Here it is. The reason you're here. The season finale. The show could have pulled a win if they were able to tie up all these threads and bring some satisfying moments. But I've got to be honest, as much as I love the book, the ending is somewhat anticlimactic. Somehow, the show still manages to do even worse, a lot worse. This is the Rise of Skywalker of the season. We start off 3,000 years ago, a teaser which doesn't tell us much except the past used to look like the future. This is objectively interesting, but it doesn't really mean much to the wider episode. In fact, the conversation between the earlier reincarnation of Rand and the Amerlin seat of that time period is basically inconsequential. We only know who they are because they awkwardly state their names to each other. Anyways, Moraine and Rand are trekking through the Blight, which in the book is a horrifying wasteland with sandworms and weird creatures. Here, it's just like a dense forest with a skeleton. I get it's probably a budget thing, but come on, some cool fantasy creatures would have been fun. Meanwhile, everyone else is trying to figure out what to do now that Moraine and Rand ditched them. Egwene says,
I love him, Perrin.
And hugs him. Good moment. But overall, no one rushes into high gear when Rand and Moraine are gone. Lan has to make a choice to leave Nynaeve behind to track Moraine down, and they have a touching moment. But the fact that Nynaeve knows Moraine's tell when tracking her is so mind-bogglingly stupid.
She has a tell. I can show you how.
Considering how warders are pretty much the best trackers in the world and are known for tracking down others. Nynaeve says to Lan that maybe she'll be an Aes Sedai so he can be her warder. Lan says,
I will hate the man you choose, because he is not me, and I will love him if he makes you smile.
I like all of this. Back in the Blight, Moraine has another fake-out death that is obviously fake. And Rand finally stands face to face with the Dark One. And thank God they get rid of this CGI. Jesus, it was so goofy. Now we get this guy as the Dark One, which is fine. He's fine. I don't know. I don't have an opinion about everything. I do, however, think that his costume makes him look like a waiter. Rand stabs himself to get out of the dream. While Rand and Moraine are going along, we see Lord Agelmar, who is defending Faldera from what is turning out to be a massive attack from the Dark One. They are some of the last defenders from the growing Blight. Now it looks like a hopeless cause, but they are still going to defend their home. Later, Lord Agelmar and Lady Amelisa have a little chat about how they will defend the city. This stuff is fine, but really requires more build-up. We know so little about these characters and care even less. If they had at least 2 episodes to build up the stakes, establish the siege, and give us characters to care about, that'd be great. This whole episode reeks of rushing. All at once, so much needs to get delivered, and we are too busy jumping from one moment to the next to really ask why. Why is it happening like this? Almost like they're trying to distract us from the weak storytelling. Reminds me of that one movie. Moraine and Rand make it to the Eye of the World, and the show never makes it totally clear what exactly it is, though it's basically the Dark One's prison. They go down the hole, and Rand says he remembers this place from his past lives. Then he has a long-ass hallucination where he sees his ideal life, living a simple existence in the 2 rivers, raising a family with Egwene. This, it turns out, is an extended trap to lure Rand to the dark side. While this is going on, the evil waiter disconnects Moraine from the One Power. More on that later, and Moraine is like, I'll kill this fucking kid if he joins you. I literally don't give a shit. I wanted to kill this whiny asshole for 8 fucking... But we now see our Trolloc threat end. Oh boy, is it a step down from episode 1. I'm not going to linger on the bad CG too long because it was clear the artists just weren't given enough time. I'm more upset about the bad blocking and planning of this battle sequence. It all feels rushed and very removed from reality. While everyone is fleeing the city, Egwene and Nynaeve stay to fight. They join the other magic users by entering from somewhere. Also, why are they waiting for the army to get obliterated? Couldn't they stand on the wall? They turn out to be so overpowered I can't help but feel like many people died for no reason. While everyone is fighting or standing, Perrin complains that being a pacifist is unhelpful.
What are we supposed to do? Just watch our friends die!
Loyal's like, hey man, you can still help out without killing people, you know? So Perrin goes and helps them dig up the Horn of Valir. Hold on. The Horn of Valir. Meanwhile, Rand is having the longest hallucination known to man. The Dark One's like, ooh, yeah, join me and you'll be so happy and have tons of sex. Yeah, man. And Moraine's like, I'm not kidding, I'll kill this fucking asshole. This goes on for a very long time. Padden Fane, the guy who has just been standing around since episode 1, finally does something. He gets into Faldera with some fades and Perrin finishes digging up the Horn of Valir. This is meaningless except to set up the second season. Readers know that the horn was actually found at the Eye of the world, so why Faldera has it is anyone's guess. It's confusing if you haven't read the books, and it's confusing if you have, and honestly is just unnecessary for this moment. The whole army gets obliterated by Trollocs, so now Egwene, Nynaeve, and the others are like, guess we gotta use magic now. They link up to the One Power and a beam appears in the sky. A beam, they destroy the whole army. Yeah, it was that easy. Oh, one problem though. The One Power is killing them all one by one, and it looks like Nynaeve is dead. Totally dead. Definitely permanent. Definitely totally 100% dead. Or maybe she isn't? How many times have they done the fake out death? Of course, at this point, it feels like anything can be reversed as long as it suits the writer's needs. This was a completely unnecessary moment that felt very cheap. Meanwhile, Rand is still in his fantasy, getting absolutely nothing accomplished. How will Rand fight back? Well, he catches on to the Dark One's plan. He realizes that Egwene would never be happy settling down with him.
What about what she wants? As much as I want this, I know that she doesn't.
This is supposed to act as some kind of character arc, I think, but it feels pointless. Rand has at many points accepted who Egwene is and respected her wishes. In episode 1, when she said she had to be a wisdom, he understood. Yes, he was being petty throughout, but his understanding of Egwene hasn't really changed. It all feels cheap and heavy-handed, like they didn't have a better resolution to his arc. Rand very easily destroys the Dark One as he grins, which makes it feel like a false victory, like maybe the Dark One was planning this all along. It all feels like a waste. Imagine a scene like in the book. Rand enters a hallucination and is so powerful he actually decimates the raiding forces without even realizing it. In the show, the Aes Sedai in training destroy the army, and it feels like Rand does nothing. Nynaeve still feels more powerful than the Dragon Reborn. Imagine how cool it would be if we didn't know who the dragon was until the very end, then Rand just goes insane and destroys an army. Everyone is speechless. We would finally see what is truly scary about the dragon instead of just being told about it. After the Dark One vanishes, Padan Fain kills Loyal, a major character in the books, in order to steal the horn. Stealing the horn is accurate to the second book, but killing Loyal? In an interview, showrunner Rafe Judkins says Loyal is not actually dead, but fans were still justifiably outraged. Why so many fake deaths? It literally just serves the moment to moment while losing the integrity of the larger show. Again, it feels cheap. When Perrin picks up his axe to fight Padan Fain, he says,
"Ah, there you go. Tiniest push and you choose the dog."
I don't know. None of this makes Perrin look especially great. There's just no payoff for the wolves. You'd think the wolves would come in and help him out or something, but no, there's nothing like that. To wrap it up, we get a green screen shot of Matt in an ambiguous location. Maybe it's Shadar Logoth, I don't really know. Clearly doing something mischievous because the show wants to make us know that they didn't forget about him. Rand tells Moraine that he won't return to the others because of how dangerous he is, and she's like, okay, go for it. She tells Lan, who finally gets there, that she has been disconnected from the One Power because, you know, we need drama for next season. Our final teaser for the whole show is this. The Shan-Chan. Apparently, they really hate this random girl on the beach. They just really don't like her. And there you have it, folks, the end of season 1 of The Wheel of Time. What can we take away from this mess that has some fine moments, some welcome interpretations, and a whole lot of misguided storytelling? For longtime viewers of the Man Carrying Thing channel, you know I rarely make videos longer than 30 seconds. For some reason, I felt compelled to make a video about this show, not because it's the worst thing ever made, but because I and so many others couldn't define exactly what was wrong with it. Politics, like always, made the whole situation even more toxic. To me, it all comes down to the writing. The adaptational choices were important and cursed the show from the start, but that wasn't all. There are some great videos, by the way, and channels that cover just the adaptational aspects. I'll link that below. To me, it all comes down to stagnant characters, bad pacing, and halting progress. How did our characters change and grow? Let's look at the character arcs for season 1. Rand's character arc isn't so much that of self-acceptance like in the book, but of accepting that Egwene wants to be an Aes Sedai. He basically came to terms with that in episode 1. That's really her character arc, except accepting she can have both. Nynaeve learns to trust a little more, but Perrin stays the same. Lan opens up more to Nynaeve, and what is Moiraine's arc? I'm not even saying Lan and Moiraine need arcs in season 1. In the book, they're supporting characters, especially Lan. As the adults in the room, they are mostly stable and reliable. The story isn't really about them. This is an issue in the show. Our showrunner even talks about the issue of setting up Lan and Moiraine in season 2 when they are mostly absent in the second book. They should have never been treated like primary characters. This is like adapting The Hobbit and making Gandalf more important than Bilbo. Oh wait. All this leaves me to ask, is there any hope for the second season? I mean, I hope so. I do not want to see this fail. I hope the success of the first season gives Amazon the confidence to give them even more money and time for the second season. This video took a long time to make, and I want to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring it. Thank you, viewer, for watching. I love making this type of long-form content, but struggle to find the time because I'm a full-time student. If you like this stuff and want more, please consider signing up to my Patreon because I want to be able to make this type of stuff regularly. Thank you to my patrons for sticking through thick and thin. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I thank you for everyone for supporting the channel. I can't believe we're almost at 100K. That's insane. Yeah, so thanks everyone. Bye-bye.